Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Am reading video for Friday, March 5th, 2021. I have my February literary newsletter linked down below, wherein there are snippets from the Goodreads reviews of the books I read that month, a book pick, a book meme, bookish news, all that good stuff. I talked about all the books I read that month on this channel except for one, and that is What Shines From It by Sara Rauch. This is a short story collection from Alternating Current Press, and this has become my first 5-star read of the year. These are realist stories about characters and vulnerable moments, and I just felt like the author handled things with a deft and nuanced hand. I'll link to the press down below. One of the nice things about small presses is that they can get creative in all sorts of ways, like all of the stories have illustrations accompanying them. I picked this book a little while back for a page 112 tag, and I didn't speak very highly of it in the tag, although the writing of that page really stuck out to me, and it bore fruit really throughout the rest of the stories. I thought she continued to have a strong writing voice. Anyway, I figured I'd just rehash that now, or basically insert a clip of me reading from page 112. Dust on the picture frames and a pile of unopened mail and unpaid bills, my chores neglected. This morning, frost laceworks the windows and sunlight wavers along the walls. Winter should have let us out of its grip by now, first week of May, and by mid-afternoon it'll be warm enough to shed a layer or two, but things remain frozen. I trace the crackled ice with my fingers, try to memorize the fractals. On the back of an envelope, I draw a heart and leave it where Dot will see. By the time I get to the studio, the sun's high and there isn't time for me to throw before I'm supposed to meet Michael. The broken pots hunker on their shelf, surly and jagged. Might as well. In my tool cabinet sit the resin and the lacquer in their squat jars with tiny, tight Asian characters on the labels. Little bag of gold powder with a price tag that made Dot shake her head in disbelief. The process increases the object's value, I told her, an ancient practice. But she's never been one for metaphor. And it is a process. Caught up in the filing, the smoothing, the dipping of the brush into the gold, I lose track of time and don't come to until my phone buzzes. A message from Michael. Where are you? I'm half an hour late and don't want to leave. I text back, studio, lost track of time. Come here? 10 minutes later, he's locking the door behind him. We've been here together 2 or 3 times, that balding crimson velvet chair by the window finally making itself useful. But we try to avoid personal spaces, places our spouses might appear without warning. I almost checked in, he said, but I got this strange feeling. Sometimes he talks like this. Though he looks like a lumberjack and doesn't believe in his wife's God, he swears by a buried intuition I can't help but be crazy for. I'm waiting in my truck, he says, and who walks out of the lobby but one of my colleagues, straightening his tie and looking rather satisfied, followed a few minutes later by another colleague, dazed and her shirt buttoned wrong. We'll have to switch motels again, I say. Michael shakes his head like he's clearing some thought he doesn't want. I wonder, he says, if that's what we look like. Okay, moving on to March reading. The first book I picked up this month is The Nest by Cynthia Sweeney. This has been on my Goodreads TBR since 2016, so it's one of my 2021 goals to clear 2016 from Goodreads, so figured I'd go for this one. I've also owned it, a used copy, for several years now, so excited to finally get it off of, well, actually this was on the tripod, the makeshift tripod that my camera's sitting on now. But anyway, this is a book that caught my attention. I remember they talked about it on Book Riot a lot. It's sort of guilty pleasure reading in a way, rich people problem sort of reading, in that we are primarily following 4 siblings from a well-to-do family, and their father set aside some money for them that actually started to balloon into something they call The Nest, which I think a couple $1 million that they would all 4 get their hands on when the youngest sibling turned 40. But shortly before that time, the oldest sibling decided, after doing some drugs and some drinking, to take a waitress from a wedding that he was attending and crash his car and, a lot ensued from that, you know, needing some payoffs for the waitress who ended up sustaining significant injuries, and also his wife and all of that. So their mother decided to break the trust and pay from the nest. And so the siblings are about to get a lot less money that they assumed that they would get. And meanwhile, they'd kind of been living the high life, you know, and spending more than really they should, and they were just expecting the nest to save them in the end, and now the nest isn't there anymore. So we're basically following them around as they are trying to hedge things together in the aftermath of this, trying to see if their brother might actually bail them out, which seems kind of unlikely. He's kind of the least likable character in this whole thing. And just following them along on their journeys of what do they do now that they actually have to live with their mistakes. So yeah, it's kind of like a Jerry Springer-esque sort of book, like when you could look at people who've made a mess of their lives and, you know, eat popcorn about it. I mean, I'm finding it very enjoyable, particularly the two siblings who are involved in the literary world. You know, just out of personal interest, it's fun to see how that plays out. I do think Sweeney bit off a little more than she could chew with some side stories that we're also following, that I just think it's taking attention away from the main focus. I think the subplot that interests me the least has to do with the two twins of the youngest sibling and random shenanigans they get into, which I don't think are that well, you know, explored. It feels more plotty than anything else. And also, I think I just don't like when authors turn to twins as characters. I mean, I'm probably being too sweeping with this, but first we had Her Fearful Symmetry by Audrey Niffenegger that I read recently that had twins, and then the twins in this book. It seems like they're less of realistic characters and more there as a shortcut, like, ooh, I have two siblings, but it's like I could make them one sibling, you know? And they're all like, they feel like half-formed characters, all of them, and I don't like it. So there's that. But in terms of following the siblings, it's fun, and I do think most of them have enough dimension that they don't come off as completely stupid or, you know, shallow or evil, so, you know, there's that too. And yeah, moving fast through it, enjoying it, and looking forward to see where these people end up. The second book I picked up was on audio. Here it is in my Libby app, hopefully showing up. This is The Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. It is the fourth and final installment in her Ember in the Ashes series. This is a YA fantasy series, epic fantasy, taking place in a completely different world, although very much inspired by ancient Rome a little bit, and also some Middle Eastern mythologies, especially having to do with jinn and Ifrit and those sort of things. It's a series that's ballooned a fair bit from Ember in the Ashes, where the main conflict there was that a young slave girl, Laya, goes to this elite and very dangerous military school to try to break her brother out of a prison. And then she meets up with Elias, who is an unwilling soldier from that school. And meanwhile, he's taking part in a series of events to proclaim the next emperor of his martial kingdom that's holding Elias' people hostage. But they end up, you know, getting together, you know, romantically and otherwise to save her brother. And we have some other characters who come into play as well, especially in book 2, Elias's friend Helene, who ends up becoming a big part of government. She ends up being a main character, is probably my favorite character in that book. But yeah, from there, you know, we've gone way beyond, you know, just the interpersonal between these particular characters, and slowly we've been introducing more and more magical elements like the djinn and people taking on different roles with magic and acquiring new powers. I would say maybe that this book is the most magical world building, or at least that's what it feels like to me, like that most of what Tahir is focused on is basically wrapping up a lot of the mysteries that the magical mysteries that she set up in her world building, which is great, you know, major complaint against a lot of epic speculative work is you raise a lot of questions and then you don't answer them, and Tahir certainly seems to be answering all of her questions, and I find it really fascinating. I love world building. It's the thing that really draws me to science fiction and fantasy. A lot of what draws me to science fiction and fantasy. Although I also am very invested in characters as well. But that being said, we've had 4 books now with these characters, and I very much care about what's happening to them, especially the main 3, Helene and Elias and Laia. That being said, I feel like I'm kind of coasting on grace here. Like, it's not so much what they're doing in this book that makes me interested in them as characters, so much as how they've been built up throughout the series. I mean, it's fine what they're doing, and I'm still invested in them, but I feel like, in a way, they're taking second fiddle to the world building. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's a good way to build things up within a series like this. It's a strategy that works well for me because I already have the characters locked down. I already do care about them. And now I want to see, all of the bigger questions get answered too. So yeah, as I figured, I really am enjoying this book a lot. I don't think it's perfect, but I do think it's very creative and very propulsive. It also raises legitimate issues about violence and oppression in a way that I don't think is heavy-handed. And I'm particularly happy that characters who commit violence against any faction, a lot of the times, they are conflicted or even feel bad about it and the cost of it. Also, characters question a lot of what they have grown up with and are really changing and challenging themselves. And I feel like that has all been building up quite nicely, if not just in this book, then in all 4 books, which, to be fair, it's a series. That's what it is. It's almost like it's really a big epic story, and it's not fair to just say this one story is the only story. So yeah, I'm about 75% of the way through. I'm kind of hoping we get to see a little bit more of the human antagonist in that final 25%. She's been, like, on the back burner and discussed a lot, like, but we haven't seen her as much in the flesh, which in a way is understandable because she's secondary to the supernatural forces, and now it's their turn to shine. But still, I'm kind of hoping we get to see a little bit more of her before the end, but I guess we'll see. I will report back. And finally, next on the docket, I have this book, which is Minor Feelings, an Asian American Reckoning by Cathy Park Hong. I have it as an ebook from my library, so hence just showing you a picture of the cover. I am reading this for the BookTube Prize, where I am judging nonfiction Group F. So all I will say now is that this is a series of essays. But I won't be giving my full thoughts on this book until the octafinals are over at the end of the month and we see what advances to the next round. But in the meantime, I will link to more BookTube Prize information down below. So that about covers it for me now. A new weekend is upon us, and actually tomorrow night I have a Zoom meeting with my book club, my mom and auntie's book club, which I talked about probably a few weeks ago when I read Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, which is the book we will be discussing. My mother actually snatched away my library book last weekend so that she could read it, so hope she's, chopping along with that. And speaking of reading, I will be back on this channel within the week to do my next page 112 tag, which every 4 months I in fact do a special type of page 112 tag video, so stay tuned. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.